New Hampshire state representative thinks Boston Marathon bombing was done by the government from April 23rd. New Hampshire state representative Stella Tremblay is calling for answers about whether the American government was involved in detonating explosives at the Boston Marathon last week, killing 3 people. In an interview, says that she can't rule out the possibility the government was involved in carrying out the bombings. Her remarks came a few hours after she was criticized by the Democratic Party for a comment she posted on Facebook, quote, "Black Ops." Missile strike appears to have destroyed West Texas Fertilizer plant. So you can go in there and check it out. Links will be posted. With everyone's attention on the Boston Marathon bombings, there have been a few events that occurred last week that have flown under the radar, including the explosion at the fertilizer plant in West Texas on Wednesday, April 17th. It says a very distinct sound could be heard right before the blast, indicating that some sort of object traveling at a very high rate of speed was fired into the area. Corporate media has claimed that something inside the plant set off the larger explosion, but if you carefully watch the footage, it is obvious that that was not the case. They said the explosion could have been felt, or was felt, up to 50 miles away, and it registered 2.1 on the Richter scale. So there's obviously some kind of reason that they want, all those people that were killed in that in Texas. You don't hear any kind of big memorials, no big outcries, no, colored bracelets, for a cause, no raising donations and stuff for them. So there's obviously some kind of agenda, possibly false flag, with the Boston bombing. But then with the Texas, it could have been an all-out actual attack. Maybe a tit for tat for actually carrying out the Black Ops in Boston. 4 massive explosions rock shipyard in Mobile, Alabama. 4 large explosions on a fuel barge in Mobile, could be felt from miles away in the Spanish fort Daphne, Alabama, over 10 miles away across the river. The first blast occurred on a natural gas barge on the east side of the river around 8:30 p.m. There was no fatalities, although some crew members did report burn injuries. The first explosion was followed shortly by 3 more blasts. U.S. magistrate judge in Mississippi late on April 23rd officially dismissed charges brought against Paul Kevin Curtis for sending ricin-laced letters to a U.S. senator, the White House and Mississippi judge. So they had arrested him initially on April 17th, believing he was responsible for sending the poison letters. But it goes on here and it says that they basically, the federal case against him crumbled in a court hearing in which Curtis's lawyer claimed their client had been framed by a man involved with a feud with him. The FBI said it couldn't find evidence of ricin in searches of Curtis's residence after his arrest. So maybe because he was a Democrat, maybe it's only supposed to be a right-wing extremist, so they had to backpedal. John McAfee the Belize spymaster uncovers ricin terrorist plots. This tip came from a viewer. It's probably not news for most of you, but it was for me. Tycoon says, I have bigwig laptops stuffed with surveillance malware. And he says, I'm not an idiot. The U.S. government is letting the ricin plot happen. He goes on to accuse members of Hezbollah of establishing a training base in Nicaragua, south of Belize. So you can go in there. I don't know about all this stuff, but anyways, he was talking about it before. So the terrorists, with links with the Zetas, may have used a deadly ricin from plants grown at the training camp. Women mistakenly shot at Christopher Dorner Manhunt to get $4.2 million. So they're going to pay $4.2 million from taxpayer money to 2 women injured when revenue collectors mistakenly opened fire on their truck during the manhunt for Christopher Dorner, a disgruntled ex-LAPD officer who killed 4 people in a rampage that kept Southern California on heightened alert for days. So, yeah, dead men don't talk, remember that. No charges for NYPD cops filmed punching, pepper spraying Occupy protesters. 2 New York City police officers will not face charges after the Manhattan district attorney decided that widely circulated videos of them punching and pepper spraying protesters amounted to insufficient evidence that they had done so. So defense lawyers said the use of force would have to be a complete departure from any legitimate police activity. So their whole thing is about using force. So you'd have to show an intent to assault, and you have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. Obama says don't form opinions on Boston attacks until government decides. Americans should not decide their opinions about the Boston terror attacks until the government decides its own opinion, President Obama told the nation late Friday night. Quote, there's a temptation to latch on to any bit of information, sometimes to jump to conclusions, end quote. Then again, quote is saying, but when a tragedy like this happens, it's important that we do this right. That's why we have investigations, that's why we have courts, and that's why we take care not to rush to judgment, not about the motivations of these individuals, certainly not about entire groups of people. And this is, of course, the end of the quote. But this is a stick at people like myself and other people that are out there trying to be skeptical about it, like, you know, the Congresswoman. And because we know that they do what? That they overgeneralize and stuff about terrorists and all. Oh, man, maybe we better go to Russia and stuff. Ooh, those Muslims. And they're always making quick judgments. And they use the media. Their media is completely on the White House's and the government, Pentagon, and the military-industrial complex and the international ruling elite side. So I wasn't going to include this in this first video, but I might as well anyways, because Obama was talking about how we have the court system and how great it is. The three branches of government, executive, legislative, judicial, which would be fine, right? It would, in theory, it would probably sounded good to have checks and balances, but that's just a bunch of crock of shit, pardon my French, because we know that that, you know, if Mr. Obama, who blatantly raises money from corporations, we know that, like Monsanto and that, and AT&T, Microsoft, Boeing, that's what we're talking about, the military-industrial complex. The legislative, you got all the politicians. Most of them are sworn to pledge allegiance to Israel first, and foreigners first, besides Americans, to corporations first. So we know who they really represent. We know who the president, the executive branch, really represents corporations, and the judicial branch, who openly backs corporations. Why things like this happen? Monsanto threatens to sue Vermont if legislators pass a bill requiring GMO food to be labeled. So, yep. It says here, elected officials are abandoning the public interest and public will in the face of corporate intimidation. So it's funny when he says that's why we have investigations, that's why we have courts. He just had the bill passed by Monsanto, which said that they basically can't be sued. And he passed that. Bloomberg says interpretation of the Constitution will have to change after Boston bombing, so yeah, the president should have the power to order the assassination of any American without any due process. In the wake of the bombings of Boston psyops, Mayor Michael Bloomberg said on Monday the country's interpretation of the Constitution will have to change to allow for greater security to stave off future attacks. The people who are worried about privacy have a legitimate worry. But we live in a complex world where you're going to have a level of security greater than you did back in the olden days, if you will, and our laws and our interpretation of the Constitution, I think, have to change. Never mind all these people, like I said, are working for the corporations that are taking away your freedoms. Look, we live in a very dangerous world. He said, we know there are people who want to take away our freedoms. See, they attack us because we're so free. New Yorkers probably know that as much as, if not more than anybody else, after the terrible tragedy of 9/11, in which Mossad and Saudis attacked their own allies, which, you know, provide a lot of their aid money. You have to understand that in this kind of world going forward, we're going to have more cameras and that kind of stuff. So see, no real change. This is just the way it's going to be. That's democracy. That's good in some sense, but it's different from what we are used to. Executive action, Obama to ban importation of ammunition, magazines, and gun accessories without congressional approval. So says while Americans were distracted with the nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula and the Boston bombings, Obama was quietly working behind the scenes to craft laws and regulations that will further erode the Second Amendment. So this is my website, ggnonline.com, global government news. Also on YouTube, my channels are DDarko 2012 and DDarko 2013. The headlines and links, if they're not posted tonight, they will be up there by tomorrow evening. Also, if you could help me via PayPal, I'd surely appreciate it. An IED equals WMD. So this is, of course, for the Boston suspect. It says wordsmiths and revised legal definitions are setting precedents in the U.S. and in the international community. Talking about enemy combatants and that. So it says here that they're accusing him of unlawfully using and conspiring to use a weapon of mass destruction against persons or property. So it says, give me a break. Even granting the language of the law is not the same as the language of everyday speech. It's ridiculous to call bombs that went off in Boston weapons of mass destruction. It said here, if any old bomb could be called a WMD, then Saddam most definitely had WMDs before the United States invaded Iraq. And if an IED is a WMD, then Iraq actually ended up with more WMDs after the U.S. invasion than before. Boston bombing suspect cites U.S. wars as motivation. So Says the 19-year-old suspect, Boston Marathon bombings, had told interrogators that the American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan motivated him and his brother to carry out the attack, according to U.S. officials. Boston bombings does not correspond with Chechen terrorists. The Chechen ethnicity of the Boston Marathon bombing suspects is misleading, as the militant groups of Russia's North Caucasus wouldn't be interested in striking the U.S., says Matt Clements, a regional manager at the IHS Information Company. Their actual time spent in North Caucasus was relatively small, and I think that the most likely outcome of these guys are going to be self-radicalized rather than having direct links to militants in the North Caucasus. Says, is this proof that the suspect in the Boston bombing still had a backpack on after Boston bombing? The photos were released to the press by a Florida man who is said to have run in the marathon and is said to have unknowingly captured a photo of the alleged younger brother at the following the explosion. He says here he and his friends were watching the rest of the race when they went to a nearby store, and it says here he used his little cell phone and got the picture. It says from the evidence which authorities have told the public to ignore, other evidence which is still coming to light, as well as clear evidence that the FBI released what looks to be digitally altered surveillance video of the two brothers. The public has been told by the FBI, the national media, that even the president to assume guilt of both suspects. So it says here the photo provided by this news network pictured above is cropped, and other wider versions do exist. So the suspect's and ID's naked alive detainee is slain nephew. The FBI lies, says Russia warned FBI of suspects again just 6 months ago after repeated visits to the U.S.-backed Chechen terrorists. So independent journalist Dan Dix of Press for Truth, in his interview, goes on there and says his aunt identifies a naked, cuffed, clearly alive and well detainee seen in a video aired by CNN as her nephew and the Boston bombing suspect, who would later be announced dead with injuries covering his body from head to toe. The aunt is reportedly in fear for her life. One of the brothers attended a CIA-sponsored Brzezinski Influence Workshop. He attended a workshop sponsored by the CIA-linked Jamestown Foundation. The main purpose is to recruit young people and intellectuals of the North Caucasus to enhance instability and extremism in the southern regions of Russia. The CIA front, which is controlled by Freedom House, is linked to the CIA. In practice, it becomes a specialized news agency in subjects such as communist and post-communist states and terrorism. The Jamestown Board of Directors includes Zigbig Brzezinski, suspect Saudi terrorist, that was the original guy that was detained by the authorities. Al-Harbi visited White House numerous times, visited by the First Lady while in the hospital. So the Saudi national was briefly held as a person of interest and then downgraded in less than 24 hours to a witness, visited the White House on numerous occasions since 2009. Then one of the brothers smoked pot all the time, says classmates. It's like finding out your best friend is a serial killer. This, of course, is important because of this recent 420 shooting in Colorado, where they're trying to demonize it into something being more violent. You know, you relate pot smoking with violence. Drug czar talks tough on marijuana as pressure grows. So as Washington State and Colorado wait to see whether the federal government will allow them to sell marijuana legally, which technically they could tell them to go to hell, the Obama regime is busy talking about the dangerous health effects of smoking pot. So there you go. It's violent. It's unhealthy. After Boston lawmakers, take your pharma pills and drink your alcohol, though. After Boston lawmakers see case for use of drones to kill Americans. Says the use of drones to kill American citizens is not inherently illegal as long as that citizen is a combatant, a constitutional expert told the Senate panel considering the implications of targeting killings on Tuesday, so long as American citizens are enemy combats or combatants. Basically, in the aftermath of the bombings, lawmakers have changed their tune on whether a drone should ever be used to target an American citizen on U.S. soil. Rand Paul angers libertarians with new drone comments. So he says here he's taking flack over comments he made to Fox Business, suggesting that his anti-drone stance isn't quite anti-drone, saying, "I've never argued against any technology being used when you have an imminent threat, an act of crime going on. If someone comes out of a liquor store with a weapon and $50 cash, I don't care if a drone kills him or a policeman kills him." So like I said, can't be trusted. Definite Zionist. It says here Google's Eric Schmidt private drones should be banned. Says there that the drones need to be banned by international treaties before the devices fall into the hands of private users, including terrorists. Well, he's saying that individual users are terrorists. Senator Chuck Schumer on border security, we need more drones, certainly. After U.S. troops leave, armed drones will patrol Afghan's opium poppy farm skies. An expert tells the Senate drone war terrorizes Yemenis. This is after U.S. drone strikes killed 5 suspects and 2 more in the last week. Thank you.